Hey there, hope you're having a wonderful day. In this video, I'm going to show you how to generate QR codes using JavaScript. So we're going to create this simple website and the user can input a URL and generate a QR code for that URL link. So for this example, let's just use my personal website, qrcode.com, and I can click generate and you can see we have this QR code. And you can actually test this code with your phone and it'll send you to my personal website. So we have my website, kniepcoding.com, and on my channel, you'll find a lot of coding tutorials. So I have many courses and I also have many project tutorials, and you can also jump to a tutorial section. So for this tutorial series, it will fall under website projects, and I have website projects for creating an analog clock and a password generator, an iPhone iOS calculator, and if you scroll up, I also have a lot of game projects. So I have projects for Candy Crush, Blackjack, Snake, 2048, Wordle, Sudoku, Flappy Bird, Duck Hunt, Pac-Man, Doodle Jump, and so on. So again, you can find all of these tutorial projects on my channel as well as on kniepcoding.com. And if you want to stay up to date for more tutorials like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel. So for generating the QR code, we're going to be using this QR code library. And so you can get the CDN for the library using this link. I'll leave the link in the video description below. So I've already gone ahead and created 3 files, index.html, qrcode.css, and qrcode.js. So we're going to create a simple container with an input field and a button to generate the code. So the first thing I'm going to do is link the CSS. href is going to be qrcode.css, and over here I'm going to link our JavaScript. So script tag source is going to be qrcode.js, and we're going to get the CDN for the QR code library, and I'm going to choose the minified version. So just copy script tag and just paste it over here. So we have our style sheet and our script tags linked. Now let's create a container. So I'm going to create a div. ID is going to be QR code container. And inside this container, I'm going to add a header tag. Let's call it QR code generator. And we're going to add an input box. So input type is going to be text. And we're going to give this an ID of QR code-URL. So by giving this input tag an ID, we can access this input tag in CSS and JavaScript using the ID QR code URL. And we're going to also add a button. So button ID is going to be QR code-button. And for the text of the button, I'm just going to put generate. Finally, we need an image tag. So I'm going to separate the button from the image tag so that the image tag can be placed on a new line. So I'm going to add a break line tag. And let's add the image tag. So for the image tag, we're going to give it an ID of QR code-image. So by default, this tag is not going to have a source. We're going to update the image tag source using JavaScript when the user clicks on the generate button. Alright, so I'm just going to double click on the index.html file, and you can see this is what we have so far. Now let's style up the container a bit. So for the container, we can access the div tag using this ID QR code container. So I just want to style that container div tag, and to style a tag with the ID, I'm just going to use the hash symbol and the ID name, which is QR code-container. So let's change the font. So font family is going to be Arial, and let's add a border for the container. So border is going to be 2 pixels, solid black. Let's round out the edges of the border. So border radius is going to be 25 pixel, and I want the width of the container to be 400 pixels and the height to also be 400 pixels. So let's refresh the page. And you can see we have our container, which is 400 pixels by 400 pixels, and we have a black border with rounded edges. Now I want to center the text and input field and the button. So for that, I'm going to do text align center. And now if I refresh the page, you can see everything is centered. And now I want to place this container at the center of our web page. So for that, I'm going to do margin 0 auto. Alright, let's refresh the page. And you can see the container is now centered. Now let's make the input box and button slightly bigger. So the input box has an ID of qrcode-URL. So over here, I'm going to do qrcode-URL. And all we need to do is make the font size bigger. So the font size, I'm going to make it 20 pixels. And let's also do the same for the button. So the button has an ID of qrcode-button. And I'm going to make the font size 20 pixels. All right, let's refresh the page. And you can see the input box and the button are now bigger. And that's all we need for the CSS. Now let's write the JavaScript code to generate the QR code. So for the JavaScript, I want to reference the input box and the button and the image tags. So all three of them have IDs. So I can do const qrcode URL. This is going to be document.getElement by ID. And again, the ID for the input tag is qrcode-URL. So I'm going to do qrcode-URL. Let's also get the button. So const qrcode button. We're going to assign it document.getElement by ID. This is qrcode-button. So this ID over here. And now let's get the image tag for the QR code image. So the ID is qrcode-image. So const QR code image is document.getElement by ID qrcode-image. All right, so when the user clicks on the button, we're going to call a function. So we're going to add an event listener for the button. So QR code button .add event listener. This button is going to listen for a click, and we're going to call a function. So these images are actually going to be represented using data URLs, and data URLs are basically text representations of a file, and they provide a way to include small data items directly into HTML and CSS documents. So when we generate the QR code, we're actually generating a data URL, and there's not going to be an actual JPEG or PNG file that's created. So how do we use the QR code library to generate this data URL? Well, we can look at the documentation. So in this link, you can click on this GitHub link. In this page, if you scroll down, you can see we have some documentation, and you can click on the download link. And you can also scroll to API, and you can see we have some functions that we can use. And you don't have to click on the download link. In fact, if you scroll to the README for the GitHub repository, there's also a section for API over here. Just click on that, and you can see we get these functions. So the function we need to use is toDataURL. And if you scroll down, you can see we have an example. Okay, so let's get the QR code data URL. So here I'm going to create a variable called data URL, and I'm going to assign it QR code dot to data URL. And in here, we need to pass in a URL to generate the data URL. So to get the URL, we have an input tag, and we reference this input tag using this variable, which will reference this tag over here. So to get the value in that tag, I'm going to do QR code URL dot value. And let's print out the results. So console.log data URL. So let's refresh the page, and here I'm going to put kennycoding.com, and let's click generate, and let's inspect. Go to the console tab, and you can see we get a promise, and within the promise you can see the result is this data URL. So this is an image, and this is stored as text. Okay, and since we are getting a promise, we want to make sure that we actually get the data URL. So for that, I'm going to do await. And we need to declare this function as async. So within our function, when we call this data URL, we want to ensure that we actually get the results first before proceeding. And then here, all we need to do is assign the image source. So I'm going to do QR code image.source and assign it to data URL. All right, so let's refresh the page, and I'm going to enter my website, kennycoding.com, click generate. And you can see we have our QR code. And we can also use arrow functions. So to do arrow functions, we can just remove this over here, and we just add an arrow over here to signify that this is a function. And instead of creating a variable here and calling the function with await. We can remove that, and I can do dot then. So basically, after we get the promise from the toDataURL function, I'm going to fire another function, and we're going to take in a parameter. So this is going to be the variable name of dataURL, and I'm just going to put this inside that function. Okay. All right, now let's refresh the page, and I can paste my website URL and click generate again. And you can see we have our QR code. And the size of this QR code is going to depend on the size of the URL. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Hopefully you found this video helpful. And if you did, make sure you give this video a like. If you have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. And as always, if you want to stay up to date for more coding tutorials like this one, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.